Hi, Greg. Welcome to the session. Greg Lynn is, as you can see there, he's CEO of Piaggio Fast Forward. He's also an architect with academic positions at UCLA and Vienna, I think. He has a very strong profile in innovation. I think he was recognized by Times Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people of the 21st century. So I think it's a pleasure to have you as a sort of closing speaker for our symposium, and the floor is yours.
No, thank you very much. And I've really enjoyed all three talks. I'm actually kind of hoping to get through my presentation quickly so we can have a conversation. Um, so I'm here really to talk about a database that we've built primarily, and I'll talk a little bit more about some other facets of human-robot interaction. But for us, it's become very interesting the role that data is playing given the particular bias and mission of our company. And so our company's mission is to build technology products that move the way people move. And this is very connected to several of the talks already. We really like to know what we call the pedestrian etiquette of the built environment and work very hard to capture that and deploy it on our robots in a variety of ways. And I think I should say, I'm fascinated with NAVER labs and the NAVER environments. Our robots are edge computing devices. We don't always rely on a connection to the cloud, so we always have to take everything we do and get it in an algorithm or in a small enough model that it can be computed on an edge device in real time because of latency. So anyway, but at Piaggio Fast Forward, our design team includes a group of data scientists and what we call our smart behaviors team, which runs laboratory simulations and tests. That really is the absolute beginning of everything we think of in terms of design. And they sit with a diverse design team that includes industrial designers, UI, UX designers, architects, etc. So it's very important to us that we understand pedestrian etiquette first, and that just means that we understand how people move in the built environment with each other and with things. And sometimes we think of our robots as needing to have the dynamics and intelligence of a human. Sometimes we think of them like a cart. Sometimes we even look at them, like children, dogs, other animals. And we run all of our lab studies with a variety of people and things. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. The reason we want to do this is because we want our robots to be predictable, understandable, intuitive, and acceptable. I think that's common to every talk we've heard so far this afternoon. And our machines are primarily augmenting people rather than doing tasks for people. So it's very important when a robot is working with a person that it's clear that the robot is working with a person, that it doesn't look like it's a robot that's escaped from a warehouse or something. We want to make sure that they, when they're with people, it's clear they're traveling with people, and when they're traveling autonomously, they behave in a way that's acceptable. The way we try to do this is we define specific behaviors we're interested in, like how to enter and exit an elevator, for example. I didn't bring that with me, but that's one behavior. We'll spend about 2 months. We'll build in our labs, in our smart behavior labs, we'll build an elevator environment or elevators environments We'll then hire people, everyday people that are not roboticists, who are not with the company, and we'll put them in motion capture suits and observe and capture how they move with each other, but also how they move with things, how they push things in, you know, where the luggage goes, where the dog goes, figure out where things are in the elevator, for example. We take that data and analyze, tag, structure, and correlate it, and start to look at what are the key relationships of that data that are giving us insight. And eventually, through data analysis, we define quantifiable motion specifications for these behaviors. And then those are turned into algorithms that run on the robots on edge devices. We're using models, but those models that we use are always curated by our team so that they're compact enough that we can run them in real time without massive computation. I just want to say, like, our two heroes, and everybody, literally everybody that comes into the business, even our, you know, head of finance, we give them a Chuck Jones book. Chuck Jones is an animator, and he's very famous for this quote: "What makes a character spring to life is how it moves, not how it looks." So we don't put faces or googly eyes or voice on our machines. We use motion to communicate intention and behavior. The other hero of ours is Greta Schut-Lahotsky. She was the designer of the Frankfurt Kitchen. And she built a prototype and used a stopwatch as well as photographs to watch how people operated in a kitchen to improve the performance of the kitchen. So these two things are really everything. They're the root of how we think. And just to give you examples of some of the characters that Chuck Jones created, it really is how they move that gives them their personality and also lets you understand their intention and behavior. So we really want to make sure that it's the motion that communicates first. This is just an example that shows, you know, from the very beginning to the launch. Sorry about that. That shows from the very beginning. Hey, Emma, will you get him? I'm on a conference right now. Out. Apologies, dog. This is just showing you the Smart Behaviors Lab setup where we built a doorway that swings in 4 different directions. And we hired, you know, I think close to 100 people to come in and walk through the doors with each other, and also with carts, with trolleys, with dogs, with children, and built up a very large database that would then let us know where a person stands when they hold a door, where a person waits on the other side of the door for the person that's holding the door to come through with them. And that ends up turning into algorithms on our robot, not just to detect when a door is being held open, but also to know how to pass through the door, where to wait, and how to repair with the person as they walk back through the door. This is just a little roadmap of the creation of this database. So we've been building this database up for about 7 years. It started with a proof of concept we did with Framestore, a visual effects house in London and Los Angeles. And at that point, then we built 2 motion capture labs. One that's 18 meters long, lets us record kind of longer distance movements, and another one which is relatively square that lets us do other studies. But again, we're looking at features of the built environment primarily. And here are just some of the examples of the things that I brought with me to show you. We do maybe 3 of these features per year. So again, it's really based on defining a specific behavior we're looking to capture, and then observing at very high accuracy, an accuracy that's very similar to the sensor cluster that we use on our robots. So it's running at 120 frames per second, roughly 150 points per person, and with sub-millimeter accuracy, where we can also have gesture and skeleton information about how someone's shoulders are twisting to know at exactly what angle we can expect somebody's going to be turning a corner, things like that. And on our robots, we're also live getting gesture analysis on them to be able to compare that to our algorithms. So, for us, the reason we do this is we want, first of all, our machines to be safe. We want them to be predictable. And I would say predictability comes before acceptability. And our company really is, unlike a lot of other companies, that we don't start by thinking about how much distance to stay away from a person or how to avoid contact with a person. Our robots actually come in contact with people all the time. We are more focused on what is the pedestrian etiquette in a particular situation. And frankly, most of the time, it means our robots are trying to stay within 2 meters of a person. And at most conversations with other roboticists, they'll say, well, our robot dog has to always stay 2 meters away from a person for safety. And actually, for safety, we're always staying within 2 meters of a person most of the time. So we're really trying to figure out how to be in super close proximity to people and in crowds, and to behave in a way that is like the way you would move with a person or a dog or a cart. Okay, so a little bit about our database. Of course, we have video, but really we have a 3-dimensional mocap database. We have a scenario is one of these tests where we're looking for a behavior, and within one of those behavior projects, we might have as few as 4 scenarios, I think, is the least we have. Sometimes we might have 35 or 40 different scenarios that we need to test. The participants are, we do have some recurring participants. We found that if you invite people into a lab and tell them too much, they immediately start thinking like a robot and moving like a robot. So we don't ever really tell anyone why they're there, other than describing the behaviors we're looking to capture. The hierarchy of how we do the studies and then organize the data is, first, we have these behaviors broken into scenarios. Almost all of those scenarios involve more than one person. So the group actions are the interactions between the different test subjects. The sub-actions are then broken down into each individual person. And then the features are the relationships between the sub-actions and the actions in the scenario. So to give you a sense, that these 3 pages are a partial list of the different studies. So for example, hysteresis, we realized we needed to figure out when a robot should just stop, so it's not always twitching and moving around when it's interacting with people. So to figure out what stopping would mean with hysteresis, we have 10 different tests that we ran. And within those different tests, you can see some of them are with a child, some of them are with a stroller, some of them are with a cart, and each one of those subjects gets broken down, and all of this gets tagged and structured in our database. So the features could be relationships between a leader and a follower. It could be between a follower and an obstacle. Could be between an accompanier and a follower and a leader. So all of these relationships get classified in the data, and they're primarily action based. So these features then turn into relationships that are very specific, like the rotation relationships between two people as they're moving, or the dynamic acceleration and deceleration between two people traveling together. All of these very quantifiable relationships are what we're after when we're writing the design specifications. We were just doing this because we looked at existing publicly available mocap data, primarily with the CMU lab, but also with Ohio State and the Simon Fraser data set in Singapore. And I think what you see in the percentages, which surprised us, is that most of the publicly available data that you would use to either build a model or do machine learning like we're doing to get to our algorithms involves just one person. And most of these things are task-based, like picking something from a shelf or lifting up a cup or things like that, stacking things. Doesn't really involve more than one person moving in the built environment. So, 92% of our data is more than one person interacting. And the 8% is always a person interacting with an object or something non-human. Like we do a lot actually with animals and dogs. And also children are human, but frankly, they move very differently. Like in an elevator, children, luggage, and dogs all go in the middle of the elevator at the door because they don't get priority to be in the perimeter, which is where the humans tend to want to be. So, and these things we find out are always very surprising, and they only really appear if you get enough data. So it's been very costly for us to build this database, but our database is, in terms of what we're aware of, massively more robust than anything we could get, and that's why we had to do it ourselves. So these are just some examples of some of the different robots. This is an industrial robot that's a cart that we use in commercial settings. The behavior here is just showing the dynamic following distance that it's keeping with its leader. And this is based on studies of people following each other and the distance they keep from each other, as well as the distance they keep from obstacles while they're moving together. So a lot of times a person following will do a little bit of corner cutting and optimizing. In terms of dynamic obstacle avoidance, this is something that we spent quite a lot of time on, watching how when people are walking together in groups and obstacles are oncoming, usually other people, what you'll see is that some members of the group will either duck, which means slow down and move towards the obstacle so that they give way for the obstacle to cross in front of them, between them and the person they're walking with. If the oncoming obstacle is at a different speed or angle, that ducking behavior will switch to crossing, where the person will accelerate away from the obstacle's path, away from the oncoming obstacle's path, so it can cross in front. And then the distance that you go before they rejoin also is something that is absolutely quantifiable. And we don't actually stop our testing until we get to more than 90% certainty with our data, you know, and it's not every single point of data, but it's with the critical points of data, like relative speed, distance, velocity, and angle of trajectory. We also do augmenting with people, not just by following behind, but literally by just traveling with a person. And obviously there are a lot of things that get pushed in the world, and even people will push other people when you're situating in a room, or again, like in an elevator. So we spent 6 months recording how people move things that are in front of them, and found out it's actually surprisingly effective to move a robot just by the relative rotation, angle, and speed that you walk towards an object. And this goes from studies with shopping carts where you're physically pushing to things where you're contactlessly pushing. But so this data you'll see here, Chris, is that there's no path to this robot. And I mean, there are sensors on the edges, but the main sensor cluster is facing Chris. He's driving the robot by pushing it, just by how he rotates around the robot very subtly as he's driving it around corners and navigating it through obstacles. So pretty much the same path you saw with him being followed, but this time with the robot following in front. Again, it's all, anybody could do this in 10 seconds by pushing one button on a robot and just walking towards it. Doesn't involve any training or anything. It just is meant to be intuitive and natural, the same way you would push one another if somebody was staring at you and you were trying to walk them through obstacles, or the same way you would push a cart. So, you know, kind of, I really want to talk about the approach to observation and data capture. But there are other things that we think about than just the pedestrian etiquette. So, and just to kind of very, very quickly lay out some of these principles, we try to make robots that have a very slippery form. And slippery just means that they don't have flat faces, and they don't have a lot of edges and corners. These consumer robots that we sell, these JITA robots, they weigh less than a medium-sized dog. They can, you know, people can back up into them. You know, we want to make sure that they're friendly for crowds, and therefore the language of them is to have this very slippery shape, you know, like a person, no hard edges, no like strong frontal orientations, not like a refrigerator on wheels or something, because it makes them much more acceptable. The scope of design we think about, you know, is not just the shape, it's also, our robots have one button, so you can interact with them without using a device or a phone. You can just do everything with a single button. They have lighting, which lets you know what mode they're in, whether they're traveling autonomously, whether they're separating instantaneously to go through a door. We have 13 sounds we designed with Berklee College of Music to express these different modes of the robot. We do have an app, but the app is really just for management, to know battery level, to control lighting and sound, to authenticate, to lock and unlock lids, things like that. But it's really, we like these robots to be just one single button operation with a very coherent language of light and sound. Again, very similar to Mattia, they don't talk, you don't talk to them. And we also want, with the consumer robots, but even with the industrial ones, to associate with the things that you would think of as lifestyle. So we want the robots to be, you know, kind of accessories that you would have a desire to be affiliated with and attain, rather than trying to make them, you know, let's say cute or curious. Like the kind of interaction we want is something where they're going to have a sense of pride of being seen with the robot. That's frankly our biggest challenge with robotics, is that they tend to not instantly evoke a sense of people wanting to be seen with them or people wanting to interact with them. They tend to be very kind of, well, we've heard it in the other talks.
At Piaggio Fast Forward,
Oop.
we think of
This is just showing a little bit for our industrial robot, kind of the ranges of autonomy. And for us, we really think of autonomy as a spectrum. So this robot that's following somebody right now, it's following them autonomously. It's making its own decisions. It will sometimes, move off of following them to avoid an obstacle and reconnect with them. We also are able to, because we're building maps on the fly, because these are for dynamic environments, we're recording paths, and those can be saved as trips, and the robots can be sent on trips that you train just by recording with the app on the phone. This is an example of a recorded path. The robot can just go back and forth between that path. And for our industrial applications where there's a robot wrangler, you're able to launch those paths remotely if you want to. We don't let people remote control drive them, but you can create paths and send them on paths also within the mapped environments that we build. And just in case anybody's interested, for research purposes, we have modularized our sensor fusion and a level of autonomy, so that any remote controlled device, like if you wanted to take one of the garbage cans, instead of remote controlling them with an operator, you could integrate our follow module onto anything that uses vector information to drive, and you could have people interacting with it. So, and this we do for other robotics companies that integrate our human interacting technology on their either point-to-point autonomous robots or on their remote controlled machines. Okay, so thank you very much.